Hi guys, my name is Angie. Welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to talk about narcissists versus empaths and why we as empaths keep finding ourselves in narcissistic relationships, especially if we've grown up in narcissistic dynamics with family members or with our parents. So let's start off by saying what is an empath? Who is someone that's empathetic, right? If you feel like you feel things on a very, very deep level, like you feel other people's emotions, almost like a mind reader, okay, you're able to like put pieces of the puzzle together, you're able to view people and be like, okay, I totally feel what you're feeling. This is an empath. An empath feels what other people are truly feeling in any given situation. You could be someone who's very loving, very caring, very connected to your emotions, very connected to the emotions of other people. And people who are like this often feel like, okay, if I just keep giving to everyone around me, then I'm going to be able to help everyone heal. Okay, a lot of times empaths are in this energy where they feel like, okay, if I just keep over giving, over loving, overdoing, giving every part of myself to other people, then the world will be a happier place. We'll be, all pooping out rainbows and butterflies. Okay, it's just like ultimate happiness. Empaths are people who thrive off of compatibility, happiness, feeling like everyone is deserves love, deserves all the good things in the world, right? And that is true to a certain extent, right? We as people, we all wish for happiness for others. And as an empath, I've struggled with this many times because often we get into situations where we find ourselves with people who aren't in alignment. We often don't believe that people could really do us as dirty as they actually can do us. Like, oftentimes, we as empaths, we find ourselves in situations where we simply are bamboozled because we didn't see the red flags to begin with, which we'll get to that later, okay? So, if you're an empath and you want to know why you keep attracting narcissists, stick around to the end of this video. So oftentimes empaths lack boundaries, okay? I actually spent most of my adult life not even knowing what a boundary was because I had very narcissistic parents. You do what I say, you do it now, you do it how I like it because I said so. And a lot of us with narcissistic either parents or relationships, we grow up or we're in these connections and dynamics feeling like, I can't have needs, and even if I do, my needs might not be as important as everyone else's because they had a hard childhood or they need this to help them prosper. Okay, I'll give you an example. So with my own parents, I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. So if I was working, they would call me because I was working from home at the time during the panini. They would say, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, lunch break is over, but leave your job, go pick up your sister, go drop her off at her job because we're not home and our jobs are more important than yours. Keep in mind, this was a couple years ago, so I was in my mid-20s, and I'm like, listen, I have a job, I can't leave my job, I could get in trouble. Don't tell anyone, you won't get in trouble, okay? I used to work for like, okay, so you could like get away with a lot more than say like a regular job, but at the end of the day, it wasn't my responsibility to help my parents. And instead of saying that, even though I tried to say that, they basically trampled my boundaries and said, "Well, if you don't do this, then here's all the things and here's all the ways we're not going to help you. We're not going to help you with your kids. We're not going to help you in times of need. You're ungrateful. You're selfish. You're an asshole." Okay, gaslighting, manipulation, which we'll get deeper into. And maybe you find yourself in relationships like that. Maybe it's not your parents, but it's just you have trouble saying no. You have trouble setting boundaries. Obviously, a normal person without like complex PTSD or who's not like extremely empathetic would be able to be like, no, I have to go to work. I can't just walk away from my job to go help you with something that isn't my responsibility? Why don't you give, her money for Uber? Or she's 17 years old. Why aren't you letting her have a license? That's a whole other topic, okay? Because I wasn't allowed to get my license until I was 18 or 19, and I didn't even realize it was abuse and control. So then you ask yourself, like, in what ways am I lacking boundaries in these relationships? And in what ways is this attracting a narcissist, right? And a lot of times when you're an empath, you're someone who can't easily walk away. You can't set a boundary and be like, listen, I'm not doing this for you. I don't care what the consequences are, because your consequences that you're orchestrating or you're putting in front of my face are nothing compared to the consequences that I'll have elsewhere. Because oftentimes narcissists or people who lack empathy will place you in situations where you have to choose. You either do what I need you to do, or you're no longer included in the family. We're not in a relationship, like whatever XYZ consequences are. So it gives you a hard time to walk away. And this leads to self-neglect. So if you can't walk away from the relationship because you're afraid of them breaking up with you, or you're afraid of them yelling at you or embarrassing you or whatever other means of manipulation that they use to control you, then you start to ask yourself, okay, how can I still meet their needs while meeting my needs? And at the end of the day, empaths 9 times out of 10 will be like, well, I guess I can't meet my needs here. My needs don't matter. I'm not able to do different in this situation or in this relationship. So therefore, I'm going to neglect myself. I'll neglect my job. I'll neglect my needs. Okay. There have been times in my own life where I wasn't able to eat or have dinner or, sleep or sleep in after a long night of because I went to school full time and I worked full time. My parents wouldn't give me a penny. They enjoyed going out to eat, overt narcissists, people who are very much showing off and all that. So, they would put me in situations where get up early, go drive your siblings to school because I need to go to work and your work doesn't start till 9, whatever, right? But what about sleeping in and all these other things? So maybe you're finding yourself in relationships or in patterns. See, because here's the thing. Empaths give and narcissists take. And a lot of times people who are stuck in narcissistic relationships, regardless of whether it's a parent, a friend, a sibling, okay, you find yourself repeating that same cycle over and over again until you learn my needs matter too. And a lot of times empaths think that overgiving and overloving is going to change someone. So I'll be honest with you. I spent the better part of my teens and 20s thinking that if I just loved my mom enough, if I just loved my parents enough and kept communicating with them and showing them and going to therapy with them, that maybe one day they'll see my perspective, or maybe one day they'll see my point of view and the way that I view things and why, things are difficult for me. But I came to realize that your sacrifice cannot heal people. Forgiving and overloving not only will not heal someone's narcissism, but it'll actually give them more opportunities to use you. Because for a lot of us, we're busy, especially if you grew up with someone who really wasn't tapped into emotions. I've had years of therapy to deal with my narcissistic parents, and from what I've learned, a narcissist really isn't able to grow past a certain age. So a lot of times it's emotionally 7 years old, 8 years old, right? And, or even 5 years old, where it's all about me, 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 me. What can I do for me? How is this benefiting me? So if you're over loving and over giving to a narcissist, this person is going to take advantage of you, because it's like a little kid trying to manipulate you, trying to walk circles around you. It's actually funny. So my son, he's 4, but he's really smart for his age. On Saturday, I told him, hey, do you want, we do special treats. Do you want, cookies? At home, we have chocolate chip cookies, or we'll get milkshakes later. He's like, I don't think I want milkshakes later, so let's have cookies. So I gave him cookies, and an hour or two later, he's like, Mommy, are we getting milkshakes still? What? You chose cookies. And I'm not saying that my kid is, right, because this is normal 4-year-old behavior. This is normal child's behavior to, like, you know, kind of manipulate. It's not, I mean, it's really not manipulation. It's just a kid being a kid. But this is very, like, this is how narcissists act, okay? I'll take my cookie now and I'll take my milkshake later too, because now I have you cornered because I'm gonna cry if my needs aren't met. And I feel like we as empaths, we do anything we can to make the narcissist happy. Because when narcissists aren't happy, they gaslight, they throw temper tantrums. Like, I remember my mom would go like days without talking to me or yell at me, right? It's like, and if you are someone who feels extremely, extremely deeply, you don't want to, like, have that reaction out of them. You want everything to be okay. You want everything to be rainbows and lollipops and Jolly Ranchers, right? So these people know that, and that's why they throw tantrums, and that's why they get angry, and that's why they manipulate, because they know the second that you sit down and say, okay, what can I do to make this better? They're going to turn around and blame you, okay? Whatever relationship this is. And oftentimes, because you are someone who has too much compassion and is viewing reasons to give this person a break when they don't really deserve it, you miss red flags very often. And for me personally, this looked like missing red flags in friendships and relationships. So I as a reader, right, I find that my clients and people in general will keep repeating a lesson over and over and over again until you learn it. So for me and a lot of other empaths, you have to spot the red flags of a narcissist. So, and especially if this feels like deja vu, right? It feels comfortable, it feels good, and always like a narcissist comes off as like their shit doesn't stink, all happiness, all butterflies, very confident, okay? And then you realize that it's like glitter covered shit, because within them is nothing good. I mean, not for everyone, but the majority of narcissists, like, these people won't change until they change. So I would spend all of my teens and early 20s constantly falling for relationships and friendships that literally mirrored my mother, because I didn't know better. And if you think about it psychologically, many of us are still seeking the approval from that parental figure that we never were able to achieve and receive in childhood. So therefore, subconsciously, you're seeking out the same relationship over and over and over again. So then, you know, when I met other overt narcissist girlfriends, right? Girls who were like, oh my God, like, look at my purse, look at these shoes. I only dated this older man, 20 years my age, because he would pay for all these things for me. And me being the empath that I am, I would try to explain to them that, you know, number one, like, you're beautiful, you're skinny, you're a size 2, all these things that I never was, but that will fade, right? Like, I'm not saying that you, like, won't always be beautiful, but when you're 30, 35, 40, you might not be able to attract the same type of, like, 42-year-old men who are after 18, 19, 20-year-old little girls, right? So I would keep attracting, specifically girlfriends at the time, who I would have too much compassion for, and they would take advantage of my kind nature, because they knew I was a psychic, they knew I was a tarot reader, they knew I was very empathic and tapped in, and I've always been a very old soul, so I've always given, you know, relatively good advice. So I know that a lot of these girls kept me around because they knew that I would be able to provide that loving energy for them that other people wouldn't be able to provide. And it, you know, it's happened for many relationships where I would have girls who would, like, use my kindness and compassion and be like, you're the only friend that I can talk about this with. You're the only person that can hear me. But here's the red flag. Are they inviting you out around other friends, around other people? Okay, are you actually part of their social circle and part of their life? Or are they using you for your empathy and everything that you have to give? Even if you're not a psychic, even if you're not a tarot reader, I still see this happening with so many of my clients, especially, I don't know why, but especially girlies like myself who are plus size. Like, you know, if we're like the bigger friends, people will try and take advantage of our kindness. Because I don't know, I just feel like, from my own experience, a lot of times plus size girlies, like, we are kinder or more compassionate, maybe because we live there more, whatever it is, right? So when you meet narcissists, they will take advantage of you because they can, because they feel like, oh, well, no one wants your love. No one wants your energy. There's something about you that's different, whether you're neurodivergent. And, a lot of empaths are like on the spectrum, or whether you're like something different about you. Okay. Social awkwardness, or being overweight, or whatever it is, or you're just extremely psychic. And also, being very psychic can make you a little weird too, because you see things from a much broader perspective versus like everyday people are very much stuck in the 3D matrix. Anyway, I'm digressing. Let's get back into why empaths attract narcissists. So, because we're so tapped in, and because we give people excuses and excuses and excuses, 9 times out of 10 these people will take advantage, especially the more we show, like, okay, you shit in my face, we're gonna sit down. Like, especially for myself, I would always sit down and be like, can we talk about this? I don't want to fight. I want to connect. I want to understand you. And they would promise to change. And what would they do 2 minutes later? 2 days later, they would do the same thing, because you've already shown them 5 times that by shitting on you and talking behind your back and doing all these things has no consequence. And I promise you, the first time you set a boundary, you will lose these people. Okay. Also, had a lot of relationships where they were narcissists, and I set a boundary and I said, I will not be treated this way, and I'm not going to succumb to your gaslighting and manipulation. Relationship over. I actually got to a point before I married my ex-husband, enough said, that I got to this point where I was recognizing narcissists, but I never recognized covert narcissists, which is going to be a whole other topic. But here's the thing. Narcissists cannot change. They don't have the ability to take accountability, and even if they're able to take accountability, it's only to either shut you up, or for them to like repeat the same mistake over and over again. Or sometimes, like I've seen in many relationships and with clients, a narcissist will take accountability to then a couple of months later be like, I didn't say that, to gaslight. Okay. So if we know that narcissists can't take accountability, but we're trying to, as empaths, give them excuses on why they can't do that. They had a hard childhood, their mama didn't love them, all this, that, and the third, so this is why they are the way that they are. But the thing is, like, narcissists can eventually change with years of therapy and taking a long, hard look at themselves, okay? But they're not going to change from you over loving, over giving, and overdoing it. And something that took me a very long time to learn, actually, is that it's not our job to change people. Okay, so especially like look at your astrology placements. If you have certain like Capricorn placements, or you're really good at like seeing, it's like if you were in someone else's shoes, right? If you're someone who's really good at seeing the ways in which people, like the possibilities, right? Like potential. If you're someone who's very good at seeing other people's potential, you might have a harder time struggling with not changing people or attempting to change people. Because changing people was never your responsibility. And it's like you see that, okay, they were hurt. All these things happened in their life. If I was in their shoes, I would need love. I would need compassion. I would need a hug. I would need XYZ. Okay. And maybe 90% of people would also need XYZ. But we were talking about oftentimes malignant narcissists who don't benefit from that because they don't view it in the same way. Narcissists cannot benefit from love and compassion because they don't understand that. And it's true. A lot of times narcissists are people who didn't receive love, had a harder upbringing, weren't like treated properly. But it's like you have a couple options with that. Either you become very empathetic, where you never want anyone to ever go through that again, or you become extremely narcissistic, where you'll do anything to kind of like, I'm like almost get your years back. Okay, I'm a channeler, so I'm hearing get your years back. So I feel like for a lot of narcissists, some of them might want to get their time back. Like, okay, I was never loved in childhood. I was touched on, God forbid, whatever happened. And now I'm gonna, like, and for a lot of them, it's subconscious, okay? Because, I mean, I've known a lot of narcissists, and you can see the way that they think. A lot of them don't even, like, it's like they don't even know what they're doing. Some do, okay, but I feel like for a lot of them, they don't even like, I genuinely don't think they realize what's wrong, or they've gaslit themselves to the point that they're able to, like, it's like a sociopath, right? If you've ever seen like sociopathic interviews, you can see how they justify everything that they've done. um so it's like a lot of times narcissists really do truly justify what they've done. And that's why it's harder for them to, like, fully understand and realize how they're hurting other people. And here's the thing. So from the outside, right? Like, we see people all the time in these relationships where, like, okay, let's not talk about parents, because parents are harder to get rid of. Okay, we'll come back to that. Let's talk about spouses. Okay, you are in a relationship with your spouse, everything's hunky dory, and then once you have children, because children from experience can make or break a marriage, and oftentimes it's breaking it down, especially if you have multiple young kids in the household. It's hard work, you're not sleeping, there's another body you have to take care of. Or even after that, when you're realizing that your narcissistic ex is making decisions based off ego, you get super angry because, or spouse, right? You get super angry because you're just like, what the fuck? Why don't they care about the kids? The kids are telling you that you're hurting their feelings, and they don't view feelings as a necessity. Like, a lot of times narcissists are like driven by logic, okay? And it's like you see all these people, and people often wonder, why don't you just leave that relationship? Why don't you get divorced? Why don't you get more custody? Blah blah blah. But the thing with narcissists is they are very good at making you feel guilty. Okay, they make you feel guilty for not meeting their needs. They make you feel guilty for not understanding them. And the worst part is, once you spent a lot of time and energy with them, especially in a marriage or in a relationship, you feel guilty for not trying hard enough. Because a loop that I got into with multiple relationships is, if only I tried harder, if only I loved them harder, if only I gave to them more, then they would see my worth, then they would understand why they need to change or do better. Okay, it's like a lot of times people become so codependent, and I was very codependent with my mom before I cut off that relationship because I had to. But it's like, you get to the point where you are trying to micromanage someone else's emotions and micromanage their life it's like in a positive way, but at the end of the day, like, that was never your responsibility. So it becomes codependent because you feel so guilty for things not working out in their favor, but you also can't get really involved in other people's karma, because then you get karma. And so many times, like, when you're an empath, you end up missing out on all these red flags, especially if this is normal to you. Especially if you started from a young age being friends with someone who is very mean and narcissistic, or you wanted to be part of the popular kids, or maybe your parents were narcissistic. So it's like, when you have lack of knowledge, when you don't understand, like, here's the thing, narcissist is thrown around all over today, all over today. Everyone's a narcissist, right? So it's like so convoluted that people don't actually know what a narcissist is. So that'll be in another video. We're gonna, like, do like 10-15 signs of a true narcissist, and how you can know that you're talking to one. But oftentimes it's like these people lack knowledge, so they think, like, okay, before I met my husband, let's just say an example, before someone meets their husband was caring, they had a mask, they portrayed themselves as one version of themselves. And then when they got married, the mask started to slip. And then when they had kids, the mask started to slip. So now you're looking at someone and they're telling you, well, I'm not happy and this isn't how things used to be, blah, blah, blah. But because of lack of knowledge, you either think it's your fault or you think the hardships of life have gotten to them. But the truth is, they were hiding who they were the entire time. and you missed all the red flags to point that they were narcissistic anyway, okay? Like gaslighting, talking behind your back, lying, saying like that's not how it happened, like whenever a fight happens, not taking accountability, like all these little things add up. And I'm not saying that like everyone's a narcissist, right? Because especially men, like men will avoid apologizing, ego, pride, all these things. There's a difference between someone who is kind of like butthurt and stuck in their ego and someone who tries to say that didn't happen, I'll never apologize, you're making it up. And the worst thing is like when someone says, well, that's why your family doesn't love you, or that's why XYZ, you know what I mean? So it's like, as soon as someone brings out other perspectives or other like narcissistic energy, you're acting like a narcissist or you are a narcissist, okay? And oftentimes too, we keep giving the person excuses, right? We love them. That's our mommy, that's our sister, that's our brother, that's our spouse. We love this person. So we, of course, don't want to walk away because walking away is hard. It's easier to deal with their tantrums. It's easier to just be like, oh, they're having a bad day and I hope that it doesn't get worse, okay? And oftentimes it doesn't. I mean, narcissists, like, a lot of times it's just like very much, words, and they'll do shit behind the scenes, okay? But sometimes it can get worse, right? And we end up giving them too many excuses. And, if they're really good at what they do, they gaslight you and they manipulate you and you start to question your own reality. And I know people that, even myself, I've been gaslit, and it took me a long time to realize that I was gaslit, because sometimes, especially when you grow up around it, you realize that, like, this person is really making you question your reality, like, and especially narcissists often have flying monkeys, okay? So flying monkeys are people that the narcissist calls upon to convince you, to get you to change your mind, okay? So this could be a brother, a sibling, a cousin, a sister, an auntie, and, especially if you're in a fight or in no contact, this person will, the flying monkey will call you and be like, why aren't you talking to your mommy? Or why aren't you talking to your husband or your ex? Or why did you leave? Is there anything that you can do to make it better? Can we meet as a family? Blah, blah, blah. And I promise you, 9 times out of 10, no one's trying to meet as a family. Okay? No one's trying to make it better. They're on the narcissist side, especially if you know that they're kind of in cahoots together. These people are working together to get you to conform with the family, okay? And it's like, if everyone gangs up against you, of course you're going to be gaslit. Of course you're going to be confused. Of course you're not going to be sure of what's happening anymore, especially like if someone gaslights you for enough years, it does affect like your mental health and your actual like brain patterning. I mean, I think it's been said that people with complex PTSD and borderline personality disorder, which are oftentimes based off of trauma, does change the chemical components of your brain. You're, especially if you had trauma in childhood, you completely end up changing as a human being. So what do you do if it's your parent, right? One of my favorite books that I've read is Mothers Who Can't Love. I don't recall who it's by, but in that novel, they explain that with a narcissistic parent, especially a mother, you only have 2 options. You can either have a teacup relationship, which is where it's hi bye. I'm only here to see my siblings, to see the rest of my family, because I know that you are, the ruler of the family. And you try and meet in the middle. You don't tell them too much. You don't go too deep. Okay. It's like an acquaintance that you have, especially if there are like grandchildren involved, or you have to like have minimal contact or cut them off. I personally have had to cut off my family because especially if you're cultural, like if you come from a family of culture, like we're Ukrainian and Russian. So in my culture, you're not allowed to have opinions. You're a parent. It doesn't matter if you're 18, 35, your mama, your daddy, they said something, you listen to them, they're your elders, okay? Or even other elders, your grandparents. So you're not allowed to have boundaries. You're not allowed to speak up about your needs. You're not allowed to talk about the ways in which what they did hurt you. And even if you take them to therapy, because I've seen other people in my culture, oh, I took my mom to therapy and she gaslit the therapist. They said that, oh, well, I'm only here because my child needs the help. And obviously, like, they have some things they need to heal from childhood. And it's not my fault. It's the way that they took it because they're too sensitive. So obviously, if you've lived through all these things, you are going to keep attracting narcissists until you stand up for yourself and step into self-worth, self-love, self-acceptance, perseverance. Start recognizing gaslighting, and don't, if you feel like a narcissist is gaslighting you, don't fight back with them. Just be like, that isn't my recollection of events. And there's always two truths. There's your truth, there's my truth, and then there's the truth. And if your truth is a completely different version from my truth, then we simply cannot have a conversation. And oftentimes, the best way to move forward with narcissists is to either set boundaries or take action in other ways. I love you. Just keep shining. You've got this, baby.